I released a video recently in which I spoke about CGC slabs and people's sometimes outrage against CGC. And in the comment section, there were a lot of people that spoke about why it is that they like slabs, graded comics. And they highlighted the fact that those slabs offer both protection and preservation. And I wanted to revisit something that I spoke about a year ago in a very short reel, and I wanted to blow it out in a little bit more detail in this video, and it is around the aspect of preservation that is associated specifically with CGC slabs, and I want to dig into that issue in this video. Stay tuned. Protection, preservation, or both? That is essentially the question. In this video, we are going to talk about the preservation aspects of CGC slabs, and we're going to ask the question of whether they actually still offer preservation protection. The short answer is yes, they do. And this actually came up about a year ago when someone asked me whether CGC slabs still contain the micro chamber paper. And you may not be familiar with this paper, but it is a relatively thin piece of almost tissue paper type material that CGC uses in comics. And this paper helps remove some of the off gases that comes from paper aging. And it also helps to slow the aging process of paper. I want to go into this topic just a little bit deeper for all of my nerds out there. Back in the day, comic book paper was made from tree pulp, and a tree's cellulose material, or lignin, turns that paper into acid over time. Enclosing a comic in a poly or mylar bag will slow this process as exposure to open air accelerates the decomposition process. However, more can be done, and that's where microchamber paper comes in. Microchamber paper is specifically constructed with molecular traps, or zeolites, that remove and neutralize acids, pollutants, and the harmful byproducts of paper deterioration, or off gases. It also eliminates odors caused by smoke, mold, and mildew. Acid migration is another issue that is actually solved or helped by microchamber paper. Acids tend to spread when two objects are in close proximity to one another, and you can actually see evidence of this when you re-bag and board old comics. You'll actually notice that the backing board for older comics will basically have an imprint in them where the comic itself has stained that white backing board, and it's no longer white. It might actually be tan or golden, or even the color of the comic itself. That is an example of acid migration. The great thing here is that microchamber paper can help with paper breakdown and also acid migration. Generally speaking, what you want to do is to insert one of these sheets between the front cover, the back cover, and one in the middle. And I think that this is what CGC actually does. The good thing is that if you buy these microchamber papers, you can do the same thing for the raw books in your collection that are protected by polybags or mylar. What happened was a person cracked open a number of slabs and did not see the microchamber paper inside, and so they began asking whether CGC still used it. They reached out to me, and I honestly did not know the answer. So this person went and tracked it down, and that is part of what I wanted to revisit in this video, because I had an opportunity to speak with Matt Nelson, the president of CGC, recently, ever so briefly, about this microchamber paper and whether CGC still uses it. The answer to that question is yes, they do, but they use it for pulp-based paper. So essentially comics that are the 80s and older, where it is comprised of a pulp paper, a newspaper print type of material. They absolutely still use the microchamber paper in those type of comics. They do not use it in comics that are calendarized. I think that's how you say a calendarized type of paper from the 90s to the present day. So I actually want to read Matt Nelson's response to my inquiry. And he says, to clarify on the microchamber paper, we do not use it for comics that are printed with calendarized paper, which do not contain acids that are present in traditional pulp paper. This involves most of the books from the late 90s to present. For all other books, we insert the paper to combat off-gassing. The big difference between these two paper types is that with the calendarized paper, it essentially undergoes a process where it goes through a series of rollers that apply pressure and in some cases heat. This process essentially makes the paper much more smooth, less porous, and allows, I think, for a glossier finish than what we used to get with pulp-based paper. With pulp-based paper, we actually get the inks that go into the paper. It's much more fibrous than what we get with the other process, where I do believe the inks actually sit on top of the paper. And I've spoken about this in previous videos where I talked about the fact that we get wavy paper now. And I think that that is because the ink actually sits on top of the paper versus with pulp, where it is actually absorbed into the paper itself. So the short answer is yes, CGC offers both protection and preservation for comics depending upon the age of the comic. And the protection, I think, is obvious. It comes in the form of the hard acrylic that serves as a physical barrier to protect the comic. Maybe a little bit better than a bag and a board and a mylar or polybags, which are all great options. Same thing with top loaders, all great options. But again, CGC offers it in the form of this slab. So one of the last things that I asked Matt Nelson about was UV protection, because that also has been a topic on the channel as of late. And he pointed out that CGC slabs offer no UV resistance of any sort in the acrylic case. But he said that that is something that they are potentially going to look into in the future. So again, preservation and protection may be elevated in the future. With that said, we're going to wrap this video up, and I want to ask for your assistance in helping to spread the word about the channel by leaving a comment behind, by subscribing if you haven't, by sharing this video with your community. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care. If you haven't already done so, I want to invite you to check out a quality publication that I am releasing called Isolation. Our issue 4 is available right now as a Kickstarter on SWOLDIERpublishing.com. Link in the description.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yeah. Should you practice art, or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master, the one that's more than a rapper, the one that's an educator, the one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts, he's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan, straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations, synergy and combinations. You fly and we waiting, Indian style in the gold.